A small British destroyer meets a German heavy cruiser off Norway, gets sunk, and the war moves on. On paper, a one-line loss, except the German admiral came home and recommended his enemy for the Victoria Cross. 8th April, 1940. Glowworm clears a rain squall and the Admiral Hipper fills the bridge windows. 14,000 tons, her main guns already training. One destroyer, a fraction of that weight. So how did she end up here? Alone? Start with the ship, because the ship is the whole point. Glowworm was a G-class fleet destroyer, about 1,345 tons. Fast, thin-skinned, built to screen bigger ships and then get out of the way. Her commander was Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roope. Remember the name? You'll want it later. On 5th April 1940, she sailed from Scapa Flow as escort to the battlecruiser Renown and the cruiser Birmingham. The operation was called Wilfred, and its purpose was to lay mines in Norwegian waters, a small, deniable piece of a much larger argument about who controlled that coast. Glowworm's job was screening. Unglamorous work. She was there to guard the flanks, not to be the story. Then, on 6th April, the weather turned savage. Seas heavy enough to throw a 1,300-ton destroyer around like a toy, and in that water, a man went over the side. One sailor, gone. Roope asked permission to break formation and go back for him. Permission granted. That request is the whole chapter. Turning to search meant leaving station, dropping the stern, casting about in a rising sea while Renown and Birmingham steamed on without her. By the time Glowworm gave up the search, her group was over the horizon. No grand plan set her adrift off Norway. One Man Overboard did. 2 days later, on 8th April, still off station and still alone in filthy weather, she would steam straight into Hipper's escort, and then toward the cruiser herself. The first ship Glowworm saw that morning claimed to be Swedish. It was not. It was Bernd von Arnim, a German destroyer running fast toward Narvik, and once the range was right, she dropped the pretense and opened fire. So this is the answer to the question I left you with. Glowworm was alone off Norway, because she had turned back to search for a man lost overboard, and that lonely course put her directly across the path of the German landings. She went looking for one sailor, and found the invasion. A second destroyer appeared, Hans Ludemann, and for a few minutes the fight was 2 against 1. Then both Germans did the sensible thing. They ran for a rain squall, and vanished into it. That should have been the end of Glowworm's morning. Instead, the squall parted, and behind those destroyers stood the reason they had felt no need to finish her themselves. 14,000 tons of Admiral Hipper. Roope did the only thing a destroyer can do against a heavy cruiser. He made smoke. Glowworm laid a screen and worked inside it, darting out to fire torpedoes, then ducking back before the 8-inch guns could pin her. This is the textbook attack. Fire from cover, force the cruiser to turn hard and comb the torpedo tracks, and live to fire again. She fired all 10. Every one missed. I want to be precise about what that means. A destroyer's whole reason to exist is the torpedo. Glowworm had just spent every last one against the one target that mattered, and drawn a complete blank. The Hipper's gunners, meanwhile, were not missing. Salvo after salvo found her. Her mast came down. Her bridge was wrecked. Fires took hold. Badly hit. Out of torpedoes, no group to run to. Roope had one weapon left, and it was the ship herself. He gave the order, stand by to ram. "10 torpedoes, no hits, and now the tubes were empty. Roope had nothing left to throw at a ship 10 times his size, so he turned toward it. Come back to the water off Norway, the morning of 8th April 1940. Glowworm is burning, her steering failing, men dead at their stations, and her bow comes around to point at the one target she cannot miss. Captain High saw it coming. The Hipper tried to turn to meet the destroyer bow on. To ram first? 14,000 tons does not pivot quickly. She was too slow to answer her helm, and Glowworm was already inside the turn. Glowworm struck the starboard side amidships. A 1,345-ton destroyer, on fire and going down, drove her bow into a heavy cruiser and tore away roughly 100 feet of armor plating. Let that sit for a moment. 100 feet of steel, peeled back. The blow wrecked the Hipper's starboard torpedo tubes. It punctured 2 of her fresh water tanks. This was not a scratch, not a scrape along the paint. It was structural damage, done to a warship built to shrug off exactly this kind of enemy, by a ship she had already beaten. Here is where I owe you honesty. Most accounts call it a deliberate charge, Roope choosing the ram, the last card of a lost hand. One source, informed by a survivor, argues something colder. The steering was already shot, and the turn that gutted the Hipper's armor may have been an accident of damaged gear, not a conscious act. I cannot settle it for you. The sources do not agree, and I will not pretend they do. What is not in doubt, the lone destroyer had done real, measurable harm to the heavy cruiser. The confrontation that began off Norway was over. And Glowworm, locked against the enemy's flank, was mortally wounded. The sea was already coming in through her broken hull. Glowworm pulled away from the Hipper's side and began to die. Her battle ensign was still up. As she rolled, the cold sea reached her boilers, and they went off one after another. The last violence of a ship already finished. She went down off Norway on 8th April 1940, bow torn open, still flying her colors. Gerard Roope came off her alive. That is the part I want to be precise about. He survived the sinking, the shell fire, the ramming, the water closing over the deck, and then spent what strength he had left, pulling his own men toward the enemy's ropes. He drowned doing it. Not in the battle, in the rescue, because there was a rescue. Helmuth High, captain of the Hipper, the ship Glowworm had just holed along 100 feet of her hull. Stopped in hostile water with a damaged cruiser, he brought his ship to a halt and put ropes and nets over the side for the men he had spent the last hour trying to kill. The cost. Glowworm carried a complement of 149. Hay's crew pulled 31 men from the water, or 32. The sources do not agree, and I will not pretend they do. Roope was not among them. He reached the Hipper's side and could not hold on. Hay had stopped his ship to save his enemy. He was not finished honoring her yet. State the record plainly. By date of action, 8th April 1940, Glowworm's fight is the first action of the Second World War to warrant the Victoria Cross. That is not sentiment. That is the calendar. Roope drowned helping his men out of the water, and for 5 years the deed sat where it had happened, unwitnessed by anyone who could speak for him. The men who survived could not describe what they had not seen from the sea. Then, in 1945, the recommendation came, not from the Admiralty, from Helmuth H.I., the captain of the Hipper, forwarded through the Red Cross. The man who sank her was now testifying to a standard his own guns had failed to break. Outweighed 8-1, out of torpedoes, they spent the ship and still tore a 100-foot gash into a heavy cruiser, serious enough that the enemy asked Britain to honor it. That is the story. Let me close it out. Thank you for watching. If this earned it, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who argues about naval history. I'll see you next time on Ask Sable.